I'm Kelley Stadelman, and I'm here to talk about just the beginnings of painting, some equipment that you're going to need, some techniques that might help you care of your equipment, and so forth, and to demo some brushes. But I know probably there are some of you who really would prefer not to paint. You might prefer staining your pieces or simply putting a finish coat on. But some of these techniques you might find intriguing they wouldn't even be considered that you've done any painting on your pieces. Let's say, for example, you were to do a relief carving and you gave it to a loved one as a gift. They take it home, they put it in a prominent place in their home, and the lighting just isn't quite right. And so a lot of the detail that you've spent carving doesn't show up. So here I've got an example of a simple design. It's berries and leaves that I've carved, and I've put a little bit of stain on them. But there's a technique where we can just take a little bit of paint and tuck a similar earth tone back behind the detail, and to make the detail of the carving pop off the background. And that's what I've done here. The rest of these are not carved, they're just painted. I didn't want to carve over and over again. So anyway, so you can see that I've tucked this earth tone that is coordinated with the stain I used in the background, and it pops all of the detail off the background. That in itself could help alleviate a problem with poor lighting. Now we could take this a little bit further, and there's 4 leaves here, and they are tucked in behind the berries. So if we were to shade the back edge of these leaves, and maybe the back edges of some of the berries that are behind, we can even get more dimension with paint. And that's what I've done in this example. So now you can see the shading has made each individual detail stand out. Now we can take it one more step, and we can add some highlight in the high areas of the carving to even give it more dimension. And I've done that in this example. You can see these berries didn't catch any light, so we didn't do any highlighting on those. These berries definitely they're out front and have caught some light, and you're beginning to see this ribbon a little bit more because of the highlighting and shading. So what if you wanted to paint and add some color to this? I would do a similar shading with color. Wherever I have shaded with the earth tones, I would add color, and that's what I've done in this example. I've put some green on the leaves and some purple on the berries. Here again, the background is shaded back with that earth tone. But to me, this is very milquetoast looking. It doesn't really catch my eye. My eye does not want to focus on any one area. So I'm going to add some more depth to the shading on the berries and the leaves and the ribbon. And you can see what a difference that will make in this example. So now you can really, it's more pleasing to my eye anyway. And adding color in the same places you would add shading is basically the technique. So now you can see the possibilities. Let's talk about the equipment to do that with. I have a list of things that I think are important to have as a starting out painting. I have this little liner brush that I like to use, and I will demo most of these brushes here in a bit. And you can see I've got into my paint recently. Your liner brush needs to have quite a bit of length to the bristles. A short liner brush is not going to give you as long of a line as a longer liner brush. I would say you need at least 1/2 inch length in the bristles. Most generally, I have a chisel brush in my hand for almost everything, all my paintings. And I recommend 4 sizes, from maybe 1/8 to 1/4 inch up to 1 inch width to start with. Chisel brushes, just like a carving chisel, comes to a nice crisp edge. So those are your chisel brushes. Then I recommend a larger round brush. Your liner brush is a round brush. This is a little bit bigger. And when you are using a chisel brush, you can't always get in tight areas. But if you touch the tip of this brush into paint, you can tickle the paint back in the areas that you can't reach with your chisel brush. So this, and there are other uses for this brush as well, and I will demo that in a little bit. You'll probably want a palette knife to mix paint, and I prefer a palette knife with a dog leg. That way you can utilize the whole back edge of your palette knife. If it was straight, you'd end up just mixing with the tip of your knife. You don't need a metal one. You can get plastic dogleg palette knives, and that works just fine and will last forever. I like to have a couple sizes of styluses. It's just a tool that has a ball end. This one has a fairly good sized ball on the end. This one has a smaller one at one end and a really tiny one at the other end. And again, I'll be demoing the use of that. You might want a sea sponge. I would say it's probably the least important item on this list, but I will demo how you can get some interesting texture with a sea sponge. And watercolor pencils. For years, when I was mapping out plans on a Santa, let me show you that here. So when I start painting, I'm thinking of what colors are going to go where. And I might want to draw some lines along the edge of the bands that I'm going to paint, how high the band will be on the sleeve and so forth. And I used to do that with a pencil. Then I would paint over that line, and oftentimes the pencil would show through my paint, and then I'd have to put on another coat. If the pencil line was left outside of the paint and I tried to erase it, a lot of times it was just a smudge. So now I know, using a watercolor pencil, painting over a water pencil line, the paint will wash off the watercolor pencil, and if I don't paint over it, simply using a paper towel, wet paper towel, will wipe that right off. I like to have a dark color for light colored paints and a light colored watercolor pencil for dark colored paints. And I'd like to make sure that you're not mistaking a colored pencil with a watercolor pencil. So let me show you how these work. I'm just going to take the tip of this brush and stroke it on the pencil, and you can see how I got the pigment off that pencil. You can't do that with just a plain colored pencil. You're going to need a palette, and I'd use a regular palette paper. It's got a slick surface on it, so that when you squeeze your paint out onto this palette, the paper does not absorb the moisture out of your paint, so it stays in a nice puddle for quite a while. You don't have to go to the expense of buying something special like this. You can go ahead and use a paper plate, wax paper, butcher paper, aluminum foil, whatever, works just as well. You're going to need a water container, and I love these water containers. You can pick these up online, and it has 2 sides to it. There's a dam here in the middle, and on this side, is ribs at the bottom, and on this side is brush holders. So when you're going to clean out your brush, you would come over here and you would stroke your brush with paint in it on this side, and those ribs will force water into your brush and dilute the paint in your brush and protect it from paint getting dried in your brush. And let's say you're gonna get a phone call in the middle of your paint session, you could quickly stroke on this side of the water basin and then lay your brush in the brush holder over here. There will be water in here, of course, and your bristles will be in water so they don't dry out. This side will remain, the water will remain cleaner than this side, so you can always pick up water on this side of the basin. You're also going to need a wood sealer, and I prefer this Ceramcoat Delta water-based wood sealer. It's a brush-on. It absorbs into the wood, and it seals the resins in the wood into the wood and gives you a nice barrier for your paint so that you don't have to paint as many coats to get coverage, and it also makes your paint go on without splotchiness. You'll also need a product to finish your carving with, your painting of your carving with, and I like this Deco Art Americana spray finish. I prefer the matte. It comes in a gloss also. It says that it's a sealer, but I don't use this as a sealer because it just sits on the surface and doesn't really penetrate the wood and give you the protection you need from the resins. If you use this too heavily or too many coats, it will get shiny, so be aware of that. And I do work in pine most of the time, so occasionally I'll have a spot that has a lot of pitch or resin in it, so I will use this tannin block sealer to paint over that resin, that pitchy area. And another important product is your paper towels. Now I just realized something.
So
Is this going to...
The camera that's recording is this camera here.
Okay.
So if you're speaking to that one...
I need to look up here once in a while.
This is the one that will...
I should be talking to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or talk to this camera here.
Okay.
That would be...
Also, is this going to be... Can you turn this upside down?
I don't know.
Because I'm looking at everything.
I can try.
Okay.
I think I can. It's a
Okay.
new editing suite for me, but they can do everything. So let's
Okay.
assume that I can, so that I can switch it.
Okay.
But to be safe, it'd probably be worth
From now.
holding it and then just switching it as well. That way
Okay.
it will help, right?
Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to demo some of these brushes that I've talked about, plus a couple of other fun brushes. Oh, before I do that, let's talk about the anatomy of the brush. This is the diagram of a round brush, and here's one in actuality. And we have the bristles at this end, and the ferrule, that's this metal part here. The bristles are inserted into this end of the ferrule, and the handle is inserted to this end. The handle is usually glued and crimped to stay in place. On the handle, you will see usually the type of brushes. This is a round brush, and it's a number 7. And then your chisel brush is pretty much the same, just a little bit different configuration. So now I'm going to demo some of the cool techniques you can use with brushes. And I have a canvas that I painted dark green. I'm going to use some bright yellow paint on a paper plate, not on palette paper. So the first brush I'm going to demo is a fan brush, and it's shaped like a fan. You can see that. And I'm going to load my brush in water. And this, you want to always load your brush with water. There are a few exceptions, but almost always load your brush in water. What happens with this is if you put your brush right dry into paint, the paint is going to coat the bristles, and you may not see it right away. There could be some residue left on the bristles when they're dry, but if you load your brush in water and blot most of it out, then the bristles have like a protective barrier from the paint, just from the water. So to load this brush, I'm going to slide in and just tip this brush in the paint, like that. And I will set the tip down, and you can see the texture that you get. I will use this on the tip of feathers for just the nice effect. Or in a minute, you'll see it may do bright branch tips on a tree. So you can see that. Okay, I'm going to rinse that brush out across the ribs and the bottom of this basin. I'm just going to tap the water out. So I'm leaving quite a bit of water in that brush because I know this brush has to be cleaned, and I want it to stay wet so the paint doesn't dry in the brush. The next brush I'm going to demo is a filbert brush. Put it in water, blot it on my paper towel. And a filbert brush is very much like a chisel brush, but it's got a crescent shape at the end. And I load it pretty much the same as the fan brush. I'm just going to lay the brush down on the palette and tip the brush in the paint. And I'm going to tap it down. And you can maybe start seeing some fish scales, or maybe feathers on an angel's wing. And this brush comes in many different sizes. I will show you an example of using, oops, I'm going to leave some more water in that brush. This Santa is holding a chicken, and you can see the little feathers. Those were put on there with a tiny filbert brush. Then, I want to show you one more thing with this fan brush, which you might use. You can lay this brush down and flick it up, and you can do grass like this, or you might be able to do like a Santa's beard. You can maybe see, of course it wouldn't be yellow and green, but you can see how you can get some hair strokes going that way. I'm going to demo a brown brush now. I'm going to load it with water, blot it on the paper towel, and I'm going to load straight into my puddle of paint here. And when I use this brush, I'm going to demo, there's a lot of ways to use this brush, but I use it mostly for doing stroke work, like on the Santa. All this decorative work here on the brocade of this Santa's jacket. So to make it work, I'm going to lay the brush down and kind of let it bend over a little bit, and then I'm going to pull back and lift up and that gives me a nice long tail. I can lay it to the side and the other direction, and I have a fleur-de-lis. Let me grab a little more paint. I can come from the opposite direction, maybe a little bit of curve. And I've mirrored my fleur-de-lis. You can lay it down not quite so hard and get a smaller little stroke. And so on. Let me rinse that out. And I'm going to grab my liner brush and see if I can add some more to this decorative painting. load my brush with water, I'm not going to blot it on the paper towel. I'm going to leave quite a bit of water in my brush because I need to, I'm going to load into the paint pile and work the water out of my brush into the paint so the paint becomes more ink-like. And I'm going to get a longer line with that. So I'm just going to add some line work to this decoration. Maybe have a swirl. So you can see, you can busy up your decorations and really make it interesting. So rinse my brush, leave a lot of water in it, and then let's practice with a stylus. So it's just metal, there's no fibers, so I don't need to worry about rinsing it with water. I'm just going to load it right into this pile of paint. If you're painting and you're wanting to do some stylus work, you need a pretty fresh puddle of paint. Sometimes paint gets a skin over it, so get a fresh puddle of paint, and then I'm going to lay this brush down and touch it down several times, and you can see that it's getting a smaller and smaller dot every time I step down. And it's fun. We can just do some little swirls. And you can see how this can really brighten up your decorative work. Okay. So let's try that sea sponge and see what happens. I'm going to load it in water and squeeze the water out. And then I'm going to load it on the palette with paint and unload it. I think I need a little more water in there. And unload it so that I'm kind of pushing it into the sponge. And I'm going to roll the extra pieces back a little bit, and I'm just going to touch down. So if you were to do this, let's say neutral tone on neutral tone, you can begin to get a little bit of a leathery look. Or if you do like a medium tone red with a darker tone red in your sea sponge, it can look a little more like velvet. And I'm going to add a little bit of water to this, and you can see how it will start to spread this out just a little bit, I think. So now I've got a little more water in, so we're getting more variations in color there. Okay. So there's a few other little fun things that we can do here, or I can show you. I've used my watercolor pencil and to do a plaid, which I've done down here. I've gridded out my plaid with a watercolor pencil, and then chosen an appropriate width of chisel brush. Let's use this one. And loaded up into my green paint and just started following my grid. And I can, of course, you're gonna have to load and come back and forth, but just create your larger grid. Then you can see I've used a liner brush with a different color to come in and increase the interest of that plaid. Another quick little fun thing that I've done with using tone on tone, I like on this Santa, I wanted his walking stick to look more like wood, so I use this technique plus a liner brush a bit, and I will load into the similar tone as my stain in the background, and I'll just jiggle-jaggle my brush and then continue and allow my brush to run out of paint. And that way I have a deep wood grain look to a shallow grain wood look. Can have lots of fun with this. So you can see that most of our work is done with brushes and how important it is to really take care of our brushes. And I did forget to talk about the quality of brush that you buy. I would not buy a really expensive set of brushes like a sable or a natural hair brush. I would use synthetic brushes, medium quality, that you can buy at the craft store. And if you bend them back, they want to spring back and remember they have a memory. These fibers have a memory, and they want to remember to pop back where they're supposed to be. Some brushes are very wimpy, and you bend them over and they kind of stay over there. Some brushes are so firm they really won't bend very much. So you just need a little bit of spring to your brushes. I'm all finished with these brushes that I just used to paint with. To take care of them, I'm going to go to the sink, turn the water on, and just stroke these on the bottom of the sink under the water, and just dilute the paint and the binders of that paint in the brush as much as I can. And I'll just keep the water running and do all of my brushes at the same time. Then I'll turn the water off and grab some soap and squirt it in the bottom of the sink. Now, most generally, I have hand soap next to my sink, so I use that to wash my brushes. You can use dish soap, shampoo. You can even buy special soap to clean your brushes. I've been using this hand soap in my brushes, and they are fine. They're synthetic, so they won't dry out from using hand soap. So, got the soap in the bottom of your sink. Go in and load your brush up with that soap. Just stroke it into your brush and get it way up and close to the ferrule. So if there's any paint up there, this is your last chance to dilute it and work it out of your brush. Do that to all your brushes. And then when you're done, just turn your water on and rinse these brushes really well in water, just stroking them under the water. Now, if you see any pigment in the foam created by the soap, you know there's still pigment, there's still paint in your brush, so you need to repeat this step. When you're all finished, you can take a paper towel and blot your paintbrushes, and then let them lay flat until they're dry. If you put them up in a brush holder, for instance, this is generally how my students come to class with their paintbrushes in their favorite mug. If you put this in your paintbrush holder while they're still wet, the water is going to run down into the ferrule and eventually loosen the glue on your handle, and your paintbrush head, the ferrule, will come off of the handle. So, and also if there's any paint left in your brush, it will also run down in your ferrule and start to ruin your brush. So the second thing that is really important to painting is paint. So I will have to say the majority of my painting is done with craft paint. It's inexpensive. There's a lot of different colors that you can choose from. There's very little mixing that you have to do. In fact, go online to the brands. Like this is Delta, we have Americana, there's Folk Art, and all of those companies, I believe, have a chart on their website. And it will give you a list of all their colors and their corresponding highlight color and shading color. So it takes the guesswork out of how to shade and highlight that color. And you don't have to mix. So that's really handy. I have carvings up on my shelves in my studio that I painted decades ago, and they look just as vibrant as they always have. However, recently I did a project for a church, and I carved a crucifix, and they wanted the body of Christ painted realistically. So I did some research and came across this brand of paint. Golden is the brand, and it's pure pigment. By the way, for your information, the flesh tone, which was most of the painting on the crucifix, was flesh. And I made my own flesh by mixing red, yellow, and blue, the primary colors, equally. And I ended up with a puddle of brown paint, and I mixed a little bit of that with white and came up with my flesh tone. I did try to do that with my craft paint, and I ended up with gray every time. So the more expensive paints are pure pigments. The craft paints, who knows what the manufacturer put in this paint. Obviously, it's not just red or it's not just yellow. Whatever they put in there, it always, for some reason, ended up being gray. When I buy paints, I like to make a chart for myself. So I do it by brand. So each brand of paint I have a chart like this. I put the brand name at the very top. I paint a black line down the center of where I'm going to put my sample of color. And then I take a chisel brush and I brush each color across that black line. And before it's dry, I'll take a clean wet brush and I'll scrub out on this side of that streak. I'll write the name of that color, and then I've got a ton of information there. One, it's easy to see on a white background. All my colors are on white background. I can see the tone of orange this is. I can see that it didn't cover the black paint very well, so that tells me it's transparent. And then on this side where I scrubbed out, I didn't get too much of the white background through. That tells me this orange is a good staining color. It's really stained the background. This orange is more of a rusty orange. You can see it covered the black, so it's pretty opaque. And over here, I can't see any area that I scrubbed through, so it is very staining. If you look at the reds over here, they're not very staining. You can see the background coming through. It's really good to have these up on the wall or in a notebook, so that if you're thinking in your head of a particular red and you can't remember what brand it was or what the color name was, you can go to your reference and pick it out and go straight to that paint. If you end up wanting to do some color mixing, I would suggest making a chart and doing your color mixing the same every time. We know that blue and yellow make green, so I wanted a particular green, and I didn't know which blue and yellow would create that for me. So I took 5 different blues here and 3 different yellows. So I first mixed this blue and this yellow and came up with a pretty nice bright green and the gradation from a lot of yellow to more blue. I mixed this yellow with this blue and came up with a more muted green. Then I mixed this color, this blue, and this yellow, and it ended up being a very blue-green, quite a bit different than the others. So when you do these charts, do them the same every time, and then put them in a notebook as a reference. And if you think, well, I used that particular green on a project A month ago, I went that same green. What were those colors that I used? You can go to your chart. You can even write a note under the green which project you use this color on, and it's a great reference. So I will be giving a class in October, in the future, on actually being in the studio with a brush in your hand and paint in front of you, and we're going to do some practice exercises to learn brush control and learn how to do some of these techniques. So this is one of the projects we'll be doing. We'll base coat like 3 circles in a medium tone paint, and we will do some shading around the edges with a darker tone for shadows. And we'll learn how to do that and get a nice gradation from very dark here along the edge and subtly more into the center. And then we'll learn how to do the highlighting of that circle. We will also be talking about how to paint a male face, like a Santa face with a beard, versus a female face, and probably try to do a blue and a brown eye, a little more realistic, which can really enhance your projects. We'll also talk about how to do stroke work. We'll do some practice doing the doodahs that I've done on this Santa and a lot of Santas, and hopefully have a good understanding of the use of your brushes and paint. Thank you so much.
I'll write down some questions.
Okay.
And then you can pretend that they were asked. And
Okay.
then you can just kind of go through them. So how many coats of sealer would you put on?
Okay.
And then how do you use the palette knife with acrylics?
Okay.
How to think about oil paints versus acrylics. How do you assess old brushes and how do you restore them?
Okay.
Like bristles breaking, falling off, crooked, all that stuff. Why do you use palette paper? Why do you like palette paper? And then what's the working time before paint dries on a brush, so that if the proverbial phone call comes in with a bathroom break, when are you in trouble? Those kind of
Okay.
things. Are there any other kind of things that you might want to mention? This is a roll of toilet paper or
Right.
something. You might want to mention your paper towel use,
Okay.
use, right?
Okay.
Because you're not using paper towels for here. This
Yeah.
is your, or is it?
Yeah, it's just
So
on
what-
top.
what is it? This is just a backer or a sponge kind of a thing?
Right, it just pulls the, yeah, and I can
Yeah.
go over that.
You might want to
Okay,
talk about that.
okay, Can
I think that's it.
okay.
So if that helps.
Yeah, yeah. Just as some added tips, the sealer that I use, I put 1 coat of sealer on my projects. If you use more than 1 coat of sealer, you will have such a barrier that your acrylic water-based paint will bead up on it. So just 1 coat of paint or 1 coat of sealer before you paint. If you end up making a mistake and putting more than 1 coat of sealer on, you can take a brown paper bag, a grocery sack, wad it up and just buff over your piece, and that will break the sheen on your sealer and you'll be able to paint over it. I can show you how to use this palette knife when I'm mixing colors. Let's just see what kind of green we come up with here. So there's a rule of thumb here. When you're mixing 2 colors, you mix a little bit of the dark into the light. So start with the light color, and let's just pull some of this over here. Always start with the light first. If you try to lighten up a dark color, you're going to use a huge amount of paint. So we're going to start with the light one and just add a little bit of the darker to it. So there's a little bit of blue paint. Let's put another little bit in here. And you can see, you can get it darker. Versus starting with this big puddle of paint and putting a little bit of yellow in it, you would have to go back and squeeze more paint out over and over again. So always light first and add a little bit of dark to it. And I've been asked, why do you use acrylic paint? Oil paints take so long to dry. Reds in particular can take up to a couple of weeks to dry. And I just find that it's cumbersome, and you can get some beautiful depth with acrylic paints, painting in layers. I have done oil painting before, and it's amazing the depth you can get, but with the right techniques using acrylic paints, you can get that depth pretty easily. Also, some of the chemicals used in oil paints can be dangerous, and acrylic paint I don't worry about it. I wouldn't worry about a child gnawing on it, but oil paints probably, yes. There are some tricks if you happen, try your hardest not to lay your brush down with paint in it. It really doesn't take long for acrylic paint to dry, especially in the summer when it's warm. It will dry very quickly. If you do get dry paint in your brush, rinse it in water as best you can. If that doesn't work, I just squish some hand sanitizer out onto my board here. You can stroke your brush into the hand sanitizer, or you could get some isopropyl alcohol and put in a jar and set your brush in it for a while, and it may loosen up the dried paint in your brush. And if it's really stuck on there, you can perhaps take a hair comb and comb through your bristles, and that might break it up enough. Know that doing that, you might potentially stretch the bristles if it's really stuck on there, but it's better to have a brush that you can use for something than not at all. This isopropyl, or this hand sanitizer, I find really handy to have, because if I happen to get acrylic paint on my clothes, I can pretty much get the paint out of my clothes with that. Also, if I'm painting along, for instance, I'm brushing along here and I get a big glob of red paint on this black, I can take the hand sanitizer, scrub it on there, and then quickly rinse it off, and I can clean up my problem areas. And I've also ended up with paint on my fingers, and I'm holding my piece like this, and when I turn it over, I've got polka dots from paint on my fingers. You can use this hand sanitizer to clean that up as well. Scrub it on there. Don't leave it too long, because it can eat through all the layers of paint. Just scrub it on until the wrong color comes off, and wipe it off. Maybe rinse it with a little bit of water, just in case there's more alcohol there from the hand sanitizer. I do prefer a palette paper to other like wax paper or paper plates. For one, I'm just used to when I put let me squeeze a little paint here on this. So my palette paper is the same configuration all the time, and I will have neutral tones in one direction and other shades the other direction. So I have a grid going here, and then I have all this area to blend my and mix my paints on. But I'm so used to the feel of my brush and blending the paint into my brush on this kind of paper. It's just what I'm used to. And I suggest if you end up using a paper plate, use a paper plate all the time, then you'll get used to that feel. Same thing if you use wax paper or whatever, it's always going to have the same feel, and you'll get getting that feel of blending the paint into your brush is key to being successful with your painting. Old brushes, pretty much I don't throw an old brush away. If they get really out of shape, you can use them for pretty interesting techniques. If they're opened up like this, you can take that brush and dab it into the paint, and you can use that for texture. So, and you can let your grandkids use it if they come and want to paint with you.